no picture, but y'all.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Wednesdays with Wolbe's. It is such an honor to be here, sitting beside my lovely wife, and doing another installment of the 48 Ways of Wisdom. Last week we spoke about a good heart, and we spoke about how important it is to put the good ideas, the good intentions into our heart, which is the bed of our actions, and making sure that our actions are pure and are holy. Today, we are going into way number 24. So we're going to be at midway through the 48 ways after today's class, right? So that's already, we're halfway through the entire series. And way number 24 is really an amazing one, which is be'emunat chachamim, which is believing in the wise, or can be understood also as valuing wisdom, the value of wisdom, the wisdom not only of each idea of Judaism, but also the wisdom of Torah, the wisdom of our sages, the wisdom of our lineage, our Torah that we have. We need to understand that we make this clear in many of our other classes, that the Torah that we have is the exact Torah that was given to Moses at Mount Sinai. And contrary to what many people believe, right, it is not made up by a bunch of rabbis. It is not the documentary theory of a couple of, philosophers or intelligent people trying to figure out, where does this come from? But rather, the Torah is a God-given document to Moses at Mount Sinai. The Torah that we have today and that we study in our class here today and in all of our other classes are all transmitted from God to Moses at Mount Sinai, all the way from Moses to Aaron, to his children, to the elders, to the scholars, to the prophets, all the way through the Tanaim, the Tanaic generations, and then the Amoraic generations, the Gaonim, all the way till the later sages, all the way to us sitting here today, and all of you joining us here today. So we have to understand that wisdom is the greatest value in Judaism. There's nothing that is more valuable in Judaism than wisdom. Okay? Wisdom is our number one asset. And if we look through all of the other nations and the Jewish nation, that has been the number one power and force behind the Jewish people throughout our history, where we educated our children. They didn't only know how to read the Hebrew, but they also knew how to speak it. They knew how to read it, and they knew how to learn and understand wisdom on their own. And as King Solomon says, Shlomo HaMelech says, if you desire wisdom like money and buried treasures, then you'll find it. And what we're always seeking for in our world is wisdom, right? Wisdom. And if you look at any of the books of our Torah, if you look at the books of the Talmud, the Mishnah, it's all filled with wisdom, And that's what our sages urge us in way number 24, is to pursue that wisdom and for it to be perfect, for it to be refined, that wisdom.
Well, I think you could get wisdom from many sources. I think there are people around you that have what to share. For example, someone before they get married, they might want to ask from their married siblings or friends or their mom or whoever it is, for advice before they get married. Not to always assume that we know everything. That's a problem that a lot of people today have, right? Respecting their elders or appreciating or searching for knowledge from older people is kind of lost. But it's not, it's not making yourself smaller or saying that you are ignorant when you ask for advice and find things out. So there's a lot to learn from many, many people all around you. There's wisdom out there, and we need to search it and soak it up. Like I was saying, it's very valuable. But specifically, we're talking about is from sages, finding sage, wisely folks, and to seek out their advice and their counsel and to get from them. There's so much, we all struggle with things. We all have things that we need advice on, and So it's a lot cheaper than therapy.
So
it's free advice. No, but seriously, therapy obviously is still very important. But just to speak to someone who has that background, that knowledge, that insight is very, very beneficial.
So the famous adage is that knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, and the more we know, the more powerful we are in our decisions that we make. So, our sages teach us that we should make for ourselves a teacher, a selech harav, right? Make for yourself a teacher. Every person should find someone that they can learn from, whether it be in any area of life, by the way, in wisdom, in how to raise children, in wisdom of marriage, in wisdom of budgeting, in the wisdom of any area, health, right? In the area of how to buy a car, right? Have someone that you can seek counsel from, and you can learn from their wisdom, right? Because when we're able to be empowered with wisdom, we're able to take our decision making abilities to the next level. So to gain wisdom, the first step is to decide that what we want from life is truth, right? And that you're not willing to settle for anything less. It's very, very interesting that we're living in a very polarized world today. Obviously, politically, it's extremely polarized. And I just, they do this after each election. And it's every time it's surprising again and again when you see the same facts. So they do these research studies of, did you know this about this candidate or that candidate? Did you know this information before you voted? And it's remarkable the percentage you're talking about. Sometimes even 40% of people don't even know what they're voting for or who they're voting for. And when they're asked another follow-up question, if you would have known this about your candidate, would you have voted for your candidate? And the number again is remarkably high. That's a problem, is that people aren't in tune with wisdom. They're not using their wisdom that they have, or the ability that they have to acquire wisdom and applying it, right? You won't one day bump into wisdom. You got to search it. You got to seek it. You got to go after wisdom. You have to inquire, and that's how we gain wisdom.
So, yeah, what I was saying before about surrounding yourself with wise people, make sure you're always open to getting advice from other people, and not being so stubborn and confident always that we always know everything about every topic. We know everything. Read books, for those of us who might not read, but just surround yourself with those people and absorb like what they tell you, and take it in. And we have to just open our minds, to these options, to the knowledge, to whatever's out there. And instead of limiting ourselves, because whatever we do know, we're limiting. Kids are constantly learning. Kids are learning. And once we're like adults, we're like, okay, we know everything now. So to stop that, stop limiting ourselves. Open your mind. Not open it too much that your brains fall out, right? Too open-minded, right? And that's a big problem also. The other side is people who like everything is good, everything, we have to be open to this and open to that and open, and then maybe that's the wrong extreme. We're talking about truth, opening your mind to the truth, opening your mind to Torah sages, and there's a lot to be learned and a lot to value from what we can learn from rabbis. And like you're saying, especially now, times are very confusing, and it's politically, and with this, like, what's the right thing to do? How do we, all these things. Sometimes, you think that like this guy's an expert, or this doctor, or this or this, that, and you don't even know who to listen to anymore, and you just get confused, and you just like, it's overwhelming. So it's good to seek advice of a Torah sage, which some people are like, well, what do they know about this virus? And what do they know about? They do know, because it's not like they're not they do their research, they find out, and they have that Torah background and this knowledge, like years and years and years of knowledge that really helps them. And if we're not open to, just to clarify, we're not saying to trust everyone blindly and not to go with what, you heard a rabbi that says this or hear a rabbi that says that. You need to have someone that you trust. And we have that. Let's say Aryeh has his rabbi. I'm sure we've spoken about that before. Aryeh has his rabbi. Our rabbi that we speak to. Aryeh speaks to weekly. I just pop in sometimes, and he helps. There's sometimes where we're confused about something or unsure of how to deal with a certain situation or whatever it is, and we call him, and it's a very eye-opening. Sometimes it's harder to swallow than others. Sometimes it's not necessarily the answer you want to hear, but it's truth, and it's good to get it.
Right. So there's another very, very important element, which is that every single idea is in the Torah. Every single piece of wisdom is in the Torah. There's no such thing as, this idea of technology, and this is an absolute heresy. When I've heard myself, some people who are in the rabbinate of certain influence basically tell me, well, Judaism isn't modernized, or the Torah doesn't understand technology, or the Torah doesn't understand the modern world, and therefore our wisdom that we have in 2020 is greater than God's wisdom or Moses' wisdom or the Talmud's wisdom. And that's complete insanity and ignorance. So let me give you a few examples. First is when we talk about medicine, right? So dealing with many of the medical advances that we have in our generation, well, the first of the modern day rabbis who really delved into medicine, technology, and to understand their fundamental structure and to apply them to halacha, to the ancient teachings of halacha, applying them modernly today, was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was like almost like you can imagine, he was like a modern day engineer. And many times he would bring in professional engineers and scientists and doctors and people who really can help explain the mechanisms of how these things work, breaking them down to their original state so that we can determine what the halachic ruling would be regarding Shabbat, regarding medicine, etc., etc. My rabbi, for example, and many other rabbis, like Rabbi Usher Weiss, when we did our Israel trip, we went to Rabbi Usher Weiss, who's one of the leading rabbis dealing with today we have this whole world of AI, of artificial intelligence. Do you know that if a Tesla, self-driving Tesla, was crashing, okay, because of whatever accident, whatever situation was happening, and it does happen that they crash, right? So it's interesting that all of the technology is pre-programmed, meaning should it crash into this, if it's inevitable that it's going to crash, it has to determine, should I crash into this car or to this car, into this person or that person? And these algorithms are all pre-programmed. And from a Torah standpoint, it needs to be dealt with as well. And what these rabbis, they're knowing the Torah from beginning to end, understanding every aspect of Torah, and in the entire explanation of the Torah given through the Talmud and through all of the history of our sages, are able to apply it to modern day situations. So it's very, very ignorant for one to say Torah is not modernized, or the Torah needs to be changed and we're going to reform it, or we're going to reconstruct it, right? That is pure ignorance and silliness. It's juvenile for one to think that the Torah, in God's infinite wisdom, couldn't figure out what was going to happen in 2020. But I want to address something else, and this is a little bit of I hope my wife doesn't kill me for addressing this, but the irony that we're living in a world which is so tolerant of every single stripe and color, where we're tolerant of people who have different sexual orientations. We have tolerance of everything, right, in our culture.
Where are you going?
But yet, the lack of tolerance for people, and I'm saying it particularly because I know this video is going to go on Facebook, and I got beaten up for people making accusations or thoughts or making insinuations of who I voted for or something like that. And I think that that is really very short-sighted by people trying to be open and tolerant only when it comes to something that they're agreeable with, but not open and tolerant to something that perhaps, and everything here is an assumption that people are making, that they're not agreeable with. And that is not open-minded, and that is not tolerant, and that is not acceptable, right? In Judaism, we don't have that. On the contrary, the Torah tells us not to be judgmental of other people, right? So I just want to put it out there, right? If anyone sees this and you're offended or horrified by what I just said, I apologize. But I just want to address this idea is that we have to be consistent with if we're going to be tolerant, then we have to be consistent with that. And we can't say, oh, those people are intolerant, those people are intolerant, but I'm tolerant of everybody except for anybody who doesn't think like me, or anyone who doesn't observe like me, or anyone who doesn't act like me. And that's obviously short-sighted. But I want to bring one more example of a sage bringing in the infinite wisdom of Torah into modern day. So there's a story that happened back in the early 1950s or late 1940s. There was an individual who went to the hospital, a religious Jew went to the hospital in Tel Aviv, and he needed to have brain surgery. The doctor said it's urgent and he needs to. So the patient says to the doctor, to the surgeon, he says, if you don't mind, I'm not going to have surgery unless I speak to my rabbi first. He says, speak to your rabbi? That's the craziest thing. He goes to his rabbi, who was the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish passed away in 1953. And you imagine, so the Chazon Ish takes a napkin and he hears the full story. He hears the full diagnosis, takes a napkin and draws an image on the napkin. And he makes some notes on that napkin and gives it to the patient, says, tell your surgeon that he should operate like this and do that, and everything will be fine. The patient goes back to the doctor, to the surgeon, and he brings him this napkin from the Chazon Ish, the great sage, the Chazon Ish. And the doctor looks at it and his eyes are about to pop out. He says, who gave you this document? He says, the rabbi, the 90-year-old rabbi in Bnei Brak. Right? He's the one who gave me this document. He says, I don't believe it. He says, this is brilliant. He actually operated on this patient the way the Chazon Ish prescribed, and the person's life was saved. And from that point on, that surgeon never operated without consulting with the Chazon Ish beforehand. And he inquired of the Chazon Ish, where do you know this wisdom from? How do you know it? You're not a master of medicine. You're not a doctor. You never studied this. How do you know this information? To which the Chazon Ish responded, everything is in the Torah. Hafachba v'hafachba dekulaba. The Mishnah tells us everything is in the Torah. Whether we learn it from the laws of Eruvin, or we learn it from the laws of the offerings, or we learn it from the laws of tithing, everything of wisdom is in the Torah. All right? There's nothing that the Torah is missing. All right? So when we talk about valuing wisdom, the Torah has endless wisdom to share with us.
I think you're talking about doctors, rabbis. I think everything's about know your source, So you generally go to a doctor for your medical issues. It's very nice to also have rabbis. I'm saying
rabbis who know what they're
know right. But you go to a doctor for medical advice. You go to a therapist for a certain type of help. But you always want to look for a doctor who's qualified, who knows what they're talking about. You don't want like someone who graduated bottom of your class to be your surgeon necessarily. But when we look for a rabbi, I think there are many rabbis and there are many wonderful people. You want to find someone that you really, not that they were, that was a bad example, bottom of the class, but you want to find someone who really you believe them, you find that their knowledge is something that you trust and value, and you can kind of test out the waters and see, listen to a class of theirs or ask them advice on something. And if they're, maybe way off, you maybe want to reevaluate. But a lot of times people go to a rabbi for advice or something, and then they'll say, oh, no. And then that's it. They're gone. I think it's very important for us to remember that there's a wisdom that rabbis have that we don't necessarily, us simple folk, might not understand, that after years of learning and applying and delving into deeper things that they understand that we don't get. But the Torah tells us don't stray from what the rabbis tell you from left or right? So what does that mean? Rashi explains on that if they tell you that your left is right and your right is left, so you need to believe them. So we might have a problem with that, right? We're saying you have to be open-minded. You want to listen to rabbis and gain from these Torah sages, but at the same time to make sure you're not delusional or blind, right? If they tell you, this is white, and you say no, it's black, and it's night outside, and you're like, no, it's not. It's day, right? So you want to know the truth, right? So I believe it was Zalman Melter. I might be wrong with that he explains that specifically Rashi gave the example of right versus left, because when it's right versus left, right, to you this looks like left, right? This is my right hand, right? So and to you there, this is my left hand, but to you it looks like the right. Because what the Torah is trying to explain to us here, what Rashi's telling us, is that what's your right can be the person there's left, and what's left vice versa, obviously. So a lot of times what's right and what's left, to us it's so obvious. This is my right hand, I know that. But if someone's standing on the other side, what's right to you, right? It depends on perspective. So very often we are so sure that we know everything, and it's important to maybe get an outside perspective, someone with a better knowledge, a better understanding, not biased, who can see the full picture, right? So you want to speak to a Torah sage with that kind of knowledge, and they can tell you, hey, I know you think it's right, but maybe it's the left, maybe it's right.
Should be seeing it a different way.
Right, is another perspective, and that's something that they're able to give you. And if you're willing to listen and open up to that, then often, sometimes again, it's harder to accept, but a lot of times I think we know that it's true, and we just have to, take their advice and.
Right. But we have the power of an uninterrupted transmission from Moshe at Mount Sinai all the way to today. That means that our parents, our grandparents, are fountains of wisdom, right? They have knowledge that they have from their parents and from their parents and from their parents all the way up to Moses at Mount Sinai. It's very interesting.
Okay, I want to go back because I feel I just said something that I shouldn't have said. I'm not saying, when I said comparing a doctor who graduated the bottom of his class, you want to go to an expert in the field. What I'm saying is, someone was just talking to me about we won't say names, a famous pastor who might live in the city, who drives very, very fancy cars, has beautiful homes, and and maybe is not really, obviously the famous practice what you preach. You want to make sure you are going to someone and taking advice from someone who lives a certain lifestyle and lives a certain way, and that this knowledge that they're imparting on you is actual real knowledge. It's not just fluff. It's not just some motivational pep talk and, feel good. Obviously feel good's important, but it's really not just what feels good. It is good. It's to be good. It's the real stuff. And it's not what?
It should be authentic.
Authentic, right. So you're saying if you are relying on a source, and if you're accepting what someone's telling you, you want to make sure that it's coming from a good source, that it's someone who lives a certain lifestyle and is a good person, right? You don't want to take advice from, parenting advice from someone who is estranged from their children, or, I'm saying possibly, probably, but
you probably shouldn't be taking financial advice from someone who's been bankrupt 50 times.
Right.
You know, it's
exactly. So I'm saying, but I would say for real, a real rabbi, a true rabbi is someone who really did his time and learned and he really does know what he's talking about. And that's what I'm talking about. So not someone who's just giving you this like
so not only the knowledge, but they actually live what they preach. Yeah, that's no question. So it's very interesting. Our sages tell us that when someone who is over 70 years old, man, woman, Jew, non-Jew, it doesn't make a difference. When they walk into a room, you have to stand up. If they say vatakum, when an elderly, what is the age of an elderly? That's someone who's 70 and older. What happens when someone becomes 70? That suddenly we have to stand up for them. Our sages tell us that someone who reaches the age of 70 attains wisdom. They have wisdom of life, of life's experience. They have 70 years of information that they can impart. They can give perspective, they can give direction, they can give guidance, because with their life's experience, they are rich in wisdom. And in Judaism, we value wisdom to the point where it is very important for a person to take upon themselves that role, each of us, to be a student of wisdom, right? So when we see someone, my rabbi would say, white here, I have some starting, right? White here means information center, right? You see the eye when you're in a mall, you're looking for information directory, right? So you look for the blue and white sign, which you have that information, and everyone goes there to get their information. Where do I find this store? Where do I find that store? You want information on life? Look for someone with wisdom. Look for someone who's mature, elderly, and also look for someone who has that white here, is that it identifies wisdom, someone who has attained wisdom.
I think throughout history, people valued their elders and respected their elders, and sought counsel from their elders. And unfortunately, today, it's a sign of the diminishing of our society and the generation, is that people just don't value elders, and they don't respect elders, and they don't seek out their advice. And it's a telling sign of where true knowledge and where we're at, because people really need to listen. Like I was saying, again, the source could be a Jew or a non-Jew, right? There's a lot of, we say chachma b'gayim tamin, which means that knowledge in the outside world, in the believe. There's a lot of knowledge we don't just say only Jews know the answers to everything, right? There's a lot of knowledge and information out there, and soak it up, right? Filter it, know what you're taking in, make sure it's truth, but accept it. The Torah, we only go from the true source, right? But there's a lot of information out there we get from all over, and we have to be open to
So the word for elderly is zaken, right? Or zikna, right? Our sages tell us that the reason we use that is because it's a combination of two other words in Hebrew, and that is zekana. This one acquired wisdom, and that's what makes them older. That means that they have more experience with life, they have more knowledge and understanding, right? Be bothered by ignorance, right? When you see ignorance, it should bother you. So that way it inspires us, hopefully, to go seek wisdom. Okay? Everyone has learned from experience. We all have experiences. But the question is not whether or not we had the experiences, whether or not we've been able to take notes and apply that wisdom so that we don't make those mistakes a second time. So we need to become the student of our own wisdom. We need to find a way to take that. You had an experience. I know this from emergency medicine, right? One of the things that you do is after you have a call of an emergency, you review that call and you look it over. Was there anything I could have done better? Is there anything I could have, right? We should have that. Our sages teach us that we should do that every day. Every day we should review our day and see, you know what? Maybe I should have been nicer to that person. Maybe I should have been more patient. Maybe I should have been kinder. Maybe I should have been more forgiving, right? Maybe I shouldn't have gotten angry, right? we have to evaluate every experience we have and look at it from the lens of, was there something I could have improved? Was there something I could have been better? And apply those changes to our lives. All right. And that's what our sages really are going for, is not just to have wisdom. Yeah, I have experience, but take that experience and apply it to future experiences.
When we were talking about what's true happiness, right? So we said, who is a happy person? He who is happy with what he has, right? There's all these not catchphrases, verses, right? So it says, who's a wise person? We're talking about here wisdom. What?
The Mishnah said that.
Right. So the Mishnah that we're doing now, right? So it says, who is a wise person? He who foresees the future, or haroeh sanolad, who knows what's going to happen. And we're not saying to go see a fortune teller. It's saying that the rabbis have a certain foresight and a certain understanding, and they know. They don't just see what's here right now in front of me. They're able to look from the past, see what's going on now, and know the projection or the, what will be. So it's a fuller picture, and it's easier for them to understand what we don't understand, and to give a better answer to what's.
I think we mentioned this once before, that the difference between a baby, a daydreamer, a space cadet, and a grown adult is 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimension, right? A baby thinks only 1 dimension. Now, that's it. I want that lollipop now, and if I don't get it, I'm going to cry, I'm going to throw a tantrum, whatever it is, because I want it now. You have the space cadet who is sitting in the present, but is always thinking about the past, and they're daydreaming, and they're like, they're not even here, okay? And then you have an adult. An adult takes the present with a vision to the future and applies it to the present, right? We are 3-dimensional. That's where we should be, at least. We see many people today who are only 1-dimensional. They're grown adult babies, right? They're grown adult babies where they don't have any foresight to the future. They don't have any history, any historical perspective. They don't see it in any real way. It's only me now. This is what I want, and this is and I'm gonna cry till I get it. Right? That's a very childish approach, and what you're saying is exactly that. Ezehu chacham. You want to know who someone is wise? Someone who can see into the future. Why? Because they have past experience that they can apply to it. Right? So that's one. But it says also Ezehu chacham halomid b'kol adam. You want to know who's wise? Someone who learns from every person. Every person you can learn, even a child, a baby, you can learn from every experience, right?
I said this at the beginning, like when if someone who's getting, something's stuck in my throat. Sorry. So someone who's getting married, if they're not ready to seek advice, this is new territory. So to come in saying like, I got this, I know it. And you see it. We were just someone, who's dating for many, many years and struggling, and not, unsuccessfully. And we both separately and together are trying to guide this person to, maybe change certain things or learn about certain things. And it's a certain closed-mindedness or just like these blinders on that this person just. And a lot of people, we all do it with different areas in our lives that we just are sure we know what to do and how to handle every situation. And this person's not open to seeing that maybe that there's certain flaws in their approach or to their how they're dealing with certain things that might be holding them back from life experiences, from opportunities that and I think that we all need to just open ourselves up, just to accept that we are still learning. We are still always be learning, always be growing, always, I'm saying there's so much opportunity, there's so much out there, and that we should want to acquire more knowledge. We should want to learn more. We should want to grow more. We should want to push ourselves, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's, we have to make changes in our lives. But when someone tells you who has a track record, right, of being right and helping you with, real life and getting you to a place where you would want to be. So then push yourself, right? And accept what they're saying and listen and be open to that.
Yeah. So imagine life, our sages tell us to imagine life as like a maze, right? A maze. Who would you want to get advice for and how to go through the maze of life? Someone who went through it successfully, or someone who just tried to break down the walls to try to figure out how to just get to the end because they're not interested in all of the challenges, right? A maze could be difficult. A maze is difficult for most people, right? Everyone has a maze of life, right? Where we have, should I take a right turn? Should I take a left turn? Well, I don't know, because I don't know what the next turn is going to lead me to. But someone who has gone through it, someone who's wise, someone who has experience can guide us through that maze because they've been through it. But an interesting thing that before we know anything about wisdom, we need to know what we're living for. Right? What are we living for? And if a person doesn't know what they're living for, then it makes it much more difficult to attain wisdom effectively. Because if I don't know what I'm here for, then what will the wisdom help me, right? Wise people know what they're living for. I mean, that's what we need to go and have this trait number 24 of seeking the wisdom of the wise is to learn from them, to listen to them, and gain from their wisdom, gain the direction and understanding in what our purpose is in this world.
The title of this way, right, is Emunas Chachamim, believing in Chachamim, believing in the sages and the wise, right? And I think also it's just Emunas Chachamim is believing that they are wise, that when we find someone that has this knowledge, I think I sort of said this already, but I'm just going to reiterate because I think it's important to believe that they do have that knowledge. Nobody's perfect. Even rabbis, the greatest rabbis are not perfect, right? Only God is perfect, right? But they're the closest we've got. They're the best. They're the closest to God. They're the closest to perfection. They're the closest to truth that we have in this world, right? So we want to strive to be like them, be around them, learn from them, and gain from them. But just to remember that they do have, right? Not to say, oh, what does he know? He just, lives in a simple house and he doesn't know about the real world. He knows, right? A lot of times that, it doesn't seem like, how could this rabbi understand my struggle with this and this and this? He does. He gets it. He understands. He has that knowledge. He has that understanding. He's, able to guide us. That's what they're there for. And we have to really use that. It's like these people pay a lot of money for therapy. People pay a lot of money for like life coaches to get them through. We have so much available to us, and you can learn from rabbis virtually. You can learn from rabbis, but it's important to have specifically. It's very good to have one person, your rabbi, your person that you like to gain from them specifically, and it's good to have that. It's a good relationship to have. So seek out someone, find someone, and
Be a student of wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. So the very interesting thing that, we've been here in Houston now. This is our 16th year. We're going to be celebrating our 16th Hanukkah in Houston. And I love every second of it. I think you love every second of it as well. It's really a great privilege to be in such a great city and to learn with so many amazing people. But we've seen something dramatic that has changed from when we came in 2005 all the way till today. And that is the advent and the creation of the iPhone and the iPad and more technology like Google and all of these other sources of information for people. Because what we have found, and this is not only in Houston, we've seen this across the globe, is that people have less and less interest in religion. By the way, this is not only in Judaism. Every religion is dealing with this. You know why? Why do I need a rabbi if I could just ask Google? Why do I need someone to tell me what to do if I can just ask Siri? Why do we light Shabbos candles? So people have become much more independent instead of having that relationship and seeking the wisdom and knowledge of their scholars, they're sadly resorting to only learning from technology. And people are becoming less and less spiritual and less connected as a result of it. So if one is Jewish, right, it makes sense to look to Judaism as your source for wisdom. And I guarantee you, Judaism's got more wisdom than we can handle, right? Judaism is it's an endless world of wisdom, right? The greatest power is knowledge. And that's hopefully our goal and our mission in life, is to acquire as much knowledge as possible, to use that knowledge to connect with the Almighty, to make our lives better, to make our character better, our relationships better. Everything around us can be improved. The more knowledge we intake, the more hopefully we're influenced by positive and good things. Anything else?
That's it.
That's it. All right, my dear friends, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege and an honor to spend our Wednesday morning with all y'all. So have a terrific day. If you have any questions, if you're on Facebook, on YouTube, or Twitter, we do see your comments. Thank you, Susan Hoffman, for your comment. If anybody else has any other comments, you're welcome to write it into the comment section. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a magnificent week, everybody, and enjoy your Thanksgiving. And we're, of course, very grateful for this incredible country that we live in, that we have the privilege and opportunity to learn Torah, something that our ancestors didn't have so freely and openly, to be able to learn Torah and to connect with one another through the wisdom of Hashem freely. So we're tremendously grateful, and every day for a Jewish person is Thanksgiving. But when we have this festival in our country, it's something that we should also be thankful for. It's another day to focus on our gratitude to the Almighty for giving us such an amazing life, such an amazing world, and such an amazing country to be part of. Have a terrific day, everybody.